Gracias por quedarse. I'm gonna present you in Spanish.
Okay.
Pues estamos con Zoë Chan, quien está en residencia aquí en SOMA y es curadora del Richmond Art Gallery, en donde ha desarrollado proyectos que abarcan una variedad de temas como el documental colaborativo, narraciones de historias, juventud, identidades distópicas y el discurso alrededor de la representación en el arte y la cultura visual.
Gracias. Gracias a SOMA, especialmente con Laura López y Andrea Rodríguez, para esta invitación muy amable y para vuestra presencia atentiva. Estoy honorada de estar aquí con vosotros y en esta ciudad magnífica. I also wanted to mention the students and artists I met today. Host? Yes, I met. Laura Mesa Orozco y Carlos Ivan. They were really great. Thank you so much. So I'll do my presentation in English. My apologies, I can't do it in Spanish. I'm originally from Guyana, which is in South America, but part of the English-speaking Caribbean, and therefore my Spanish is quasi non-existent. So today I'll speak about my trajectory and some key projects with a focus on my work at Richmond Art Gallery today. So I moved to Canada with my family in the 80s when I was 10. Does it sound okay?
Yeah.
My father is a poet and a self-taught artist and musician, and huge film buff, so I've always been around the arts, and my sister is an artist, so she decided to become an artist, and so I've always been in the arts, so I just wanted to show a photo of her work, just for fun. I've worked in different types of institutions in Canada, mostly in Montreal and in the greater Vancouver area over the past 20 years, including municipal galleries like I am now, artist-run centers, university-run galleries, and also at the Vancouver Art Gallery, which is the biggest art museum in Western Canada. So that was before I moved to the smaller museum. So my first job was at an art center called the MAI, Montreal Art Interculturel, a center that was mandated by the city of Montreal to promote, present, and support artists from different backgrounds. This was in the early 2000s when in Quebec, a lot of the focus was on preserving Francophone and Québécois culture within a predominantly Anglophone context of North America. So it was considered very controversial to have a center dedicated to supporting artists who were primarily new immigrants or were first or second generation immigrants, backgrounds, or working outside of the mainstream. So that was in the late 90s, early 2000s. So this first job for me was very influential and shaped a lot of my interests today and the concerns that run through my curatorial practice. And so I just put together a few examples. Examples of some artists, Canadian artists who were emerging at the time, but are now well-known artists in their mid-career. So this is Karen Tam, and this is actually should be called Gold Mountain Restaurant, not Mountain Restaurant, but so Karen Tam was interested in studying restaurants, Chinese Canadian restaurants across the country. So Chinese Canadian restaurants came about because of Chinese workers were hired in the 19th century to work to build the railroad to basically settle Canada from east to west. And then afterwards, when they had finished building, they opened up these restaurants that have become very iconic, I guess, and have a certain look, have a certain style. And she's very interested in how they use, for example, this Orientalist decor as a way of kind of shielding themselves from racism or discrimination within a white Canada. So you can see all the long list of all the things that she collected, everything from, you know, lanterns to rat traps to MSG bags. So that's that project. This is Howie Choi, an artist originally from Hong Kong. He's very inspired by, you know, manga, Chinese landscape painting, and sort of creating this hybrid aesthetic. This is another artist, Brendan Satish Lee Tang, who was making works, making these hybrid sort of robot toys mixed with ceramics, blue and white porcelain ceramics. I'm thinking about early systems of exchange in Asia, but also how trends like, for example, blue and white porcelain traveled from China to England and back again. So my first project that I curated, I won't mention every project that I've curated, but this was, you know, one of the first projects that I curated and presented at the MAI. These are two artists, Osvaldo Ramirez Castillo and Marigold Santos. So Osvaldo came to Canada from El Salvador as a result of the Civil War in the 1980s, and Marigold Santos from the Philippines. So they're both very interested or inspired by their experiences as immigrants. They were creating these what I call personal mythologies, where they were mixing things like religious iconography, folk tales, medical and botanical drawings, and horror films. And I really liked how they were using this very seductive aesthetics to discuss diasporic experience, so in this very poetic way. So just to give you a bit of an idea. So in my practice, I'm often really interested in very artworks that are very process-based or material-based, but I also have a strong interest in documentary inflected video. So this was one project that I did called Kids These Days that came out of, came out of my graduate research in art history. I don't know if you know Larry Clark and his photographs in the film Kids that was very big in the 90s. And so he's known for these sort of photographs and films where he shows sort of young, sexy youth, you know, having sex, being violent, doing drugs. And I argue that he exoticizes and eroticizes youth just like modernist painters did so-called primitive cultures. So I was thinking about youth as not so much as, you know, a fixed age group, but as more as a social and cultural construct. What are all of the assumptions that we have about youth? So I was thinking about artists who were documenting youth or youth subcultures. So this is from 2014, but a lot of the works were from the 2010s or the early 2000s. This was Joanne Balkan, this was a video that she did that was just based on clips of fans, women fans, young women fans for Elvis and the Beatles. So they're just, all you see are women screaming on a loop. And she was kind of thinking about that time where young women sort of had this agency and thinking about fandom. So that's this project. This was another project by a local Vancouver artist, Althea Thalberger, who hired basically, so this is kind of before YouTube, before where people would make their own videos. She did a call to singer-songwriters and asked them to submit, to apply to make a musical video of them singing one of their songs. So they wouldn't do this now in this project. But these are all set, all these young women are singing against this very spectacular backdrops, natural backdrops of the BC, the Pacific West Coast. So sort of linking young women and youth with nature, with this sort of romantic, idyllic, pastoral vision of youth. This is Sarah Fabrero's Minor Threats. So she did a call, so she was interested, YouTube had been around I think since 2008, and she was interested in how YouTube at the time was being like almost like a teaching tool. So where young women guitarists would upload videos of themselves, and then other teens would like learn how to play the guitar from these, from how they were playing. So they were doing a lot of, so some of the women who did it, the young women or youth girls were, were very awkward, very bad, and then some were just amazing, doing these amazing electric. So she basically shot each girl in whatever neighborhood they wanted. So some people were more shy, they just wanted to be in the bedroom, like for example on the right, and then on the left you see someone who's like more bold and she wanted to do it in her mall parking lot. This is another project by a Quebecois artist, Emmanuel Léonard. And so this is called The Beautiful, the Ugly in Photography. And so she asked at this school, all these students what they thought was beautiful, what they thought was ugly, what they thought merited to be photographed. And really it's just she uses all the strategies of documentary. It's black and white, which often gives this immediate feeling of, it's serious, the camera doesn't move. And we just sort of observe them expressing themselves in their different ways. They're learning to express themselves. This was another artist, Guillaume Simoneau from Quebec, who basically between 2004 and 2011 would photograph the sort of graduation parties that people would have in the bush. So I was interested in this idea of sort of young people in the bush, and that idea of like, they're outside, they're like animals, and thinking about that primitivist idea again. They're often caught like this in this kind of very white light, like almost like deer in the spotlight. But it also, as a documentary, it gives us, an idea of what the style is of the time in this small town in Quebec. This is a video called Blue Moon, where this artist, Reed spent, she found, so a lot of the works in this exhibition were also inspired by social media that was just sort of emerging at the time. So once again, she found this group of queer kids who were believed that they were actually wolves, and so she would meet with them. She met them online, but then she eventually met with them. They decided to make a documentary together. So here they are showing different ways that wolves fight. They're explaining to her the project. So there's this once again this idea of animals and youth being connected. These are large-scale photographs of notes that this artist found in books. So thinking about the creativity of artists being inspired by the creativity of youth and wanting to be close to that. So this is an artist, Carrie Flanagan, who often works. Is the sound okay? Yeah. This is Carrie Flanagan from BC, also coming of age stories. So she's known for her illustrations, and she works a lot with zines. She often will interview or ask for submissions. So she talked to different people about their early experiences of hooking up. So this one is, I used to have fake sex with my stuffed animals, most often with my koala bear. So that's this project. And I wanted to make an exhibition too that looked not just at artworks, but also at, you know, the material of visual culture. And actually my background, before I studied art history, I studied literature. And so I collected all of these books that were about coming of age, about you know, some of them are fiction, but then others were nonfiction about youth, the kind of books that youth like, sort of these romantic ideas. You can see that there's a poetry book there. I don't know, by Arthur Rimbaud. So there's these iconic, youth poets that died young, for example. Just some examples of books that were there. And these were what comes to mind when you think of youth, and these were all these people of all ages who filled out these forms, and I wanted my exhibition to be very discursive and to also integrate the words of the public into the exhibition and to keep it alive in some way. So that, it was a time when the gallery said, right gender, but now I wouldn't really do that, but you can see the different things that they say, the details. So now I'm just gonna turn to my work at Richmond. Just to give you a little bit of context, Richmond Art Gallery is, this is a very terrible map. It's even more pixelated. This is on the city, maybe on Richmond's website, apparently. Antonio got it from me. But, so you can see we're part of the greater Vancouver area. We're near the water. We're just above USA. I get to work from Vancouver. I just take the train. So basically it's about a half hour by train. So it's not too far, but we're definitely not considered the center. So we're located on the ancestral territories of the Hunkaminam speaking peoples, which includes the Musqueam Nation and other nations in the Fraser River Basin. So since the first arrival of European settlers in that area, there have been several waves of immigration that have brought many groups to the area, including the Japanese, Chinese, Filipino communities, because we're near to, of course, the Pacific Ocean. Richmond has a population of over 230,000 people. It is one of Canada's most ethnically and culturally diverse cities, and the largest per capita proportion of Asian residents in North America. So the majority of which are Chinese language speakers. So approximately 80% of the population identifies as a visible minority, the highest proportion of any municipality in BC and the second highest in Canada. So it's quite diverse. And as you can see here, it's located in this center. It also has a library. They have studios upstairs for dance classes, weaving, pottery. There's a media lab. There's also the city's archives. And our public, comprises a lot of new immigrants with waves from Hong Kong, especially since the handover to China. There's a lot of young families, in addition to regular gallery-going visitors that might come more from Vancouver. So given this content, our exhibition programming aims to reflect the diasporic makeup of the population while addressing subject matter that responds to the context and questions of this particular moment. So Canada often has a reputation of being very multicultural and open, but like other countries across the globe, there's a rise of right-wing and racist movements. We just recently had elections on Monday and just got the Liberals, which is a centrist party, in power, but they are not a majority. So the Conservatives that are more of the right-wing party did also get a lot of votes. So we're facing a rise in right-wing attitudes and affiliations, much as is happening across the globe. And I don't know, there was even also too, there was recently, for example, on the day that we left and we were coming here, there was in the news, maybe you saw it here, a car jamming attack on a Filipino street party where 11 people were killed. So we face the same issues that people are facing in the world. So as I mentioned, I've been working a lot on exhibitions that feature a lot of collaborative documentaries since the 2010s. A lot of them focusing on foregrounding the voice, different communities, and storytelling. So this project, this is actually how I met the artist Joshua, or this is the second time that I've worked with him, but Let the Real World In. I was inspired by a documentary called Godard, on Jean-Luc Godard. And for him, he says in the film, the intersection of film and life was important, and he insisted that film should bear witness to the period, so it should bear witness to your era. So this idea of letting the real world into your art practice. And so I thought I would focus on youth again. I thought I would focus on youth in particular with this idea of artists who are working with youth and letting the real world in. And I thought that was important because usually when we think about young people, we think of them as being innocent or ingenuous, authentic, unpretentious.
Oh, you're fine.
Oh, did it go? Oh, yes, I got to, sorry.
Just
it starts over. Slowly. I'll keep my finger here. Okay. So, so basically I thought, since we're always trying to protect youth from the real world, I thought it was interesting to focus on artists who were working with young people who were facing difficult realities and couldn't be protected from it. And I wanted to look at projects that seriously took young people seriously and their experiences of the world, and to emphasize their agency. So this is the gallery, and I kind of like this photo just because you can see a lot of different videos. And I find video really hard to show in galleries. Sometimes I find it looks really boring. So I always try to find ways, to maybe make it more interesting, or make sure that every video is different. So for example, with Joshua's in the corner on the right, it's life-size and in a very kind of tight, constrained area. Then I have 3-channel in the middle, and then we used these sort of risers sitting like you would use in at school. And then on the left, we have a screen, but on a poster-covered wall. So with Joshua Ocon's the halls of Montezuma, so he looked at a group of undocumented Guatemalan children who were temporarily housed in a detention center in Arizona. And we see them reciting a revised version of the official hymn of United States Marine, which is called the Marine's Hymn. And so you can't see them, you can't see their faces, you can only see their backs. And the song is very patriotic. So they're saying, we take a gun for right and for freedom and to keep our honor clean. But of course, there's the irony of the US, of course, backed the military regime in Guatemala that helped to create the conditions of war and poverty and inequality for these migrants that tried to escape to the States. By lining them up against the wall, too, you inevitably think about their vulnerability and their marginalized status, and because it was life-size, you immediately imagined yourself in their shoes. Maybe I'll so that's this project here. We have these weird stairs in front of a wall, and so it was kind of a perfect place to put them. So this is an artist from Chicago, Kirsten Linares, who's been working with this group of kids since 2016 up to the present. So we just showed a couple of the videos that she did in 2017. So basically, she would meet the kids at these annual summer camps every year. I think she missed me some years during the pandemic, but so basically, against the backdrop of the Trump presidential era, we hear, we watch the students talk about their hopes and fears. A lot of them are new immigrants, and then others are people who have grown up there. So together they write a manifesto, so you can see in the corner in the yellow, they wrote a manifesto together. They took over the streets. You can see they're walking the streets in these silver costumes, and the silver costumes were made out of those emergency blankets. And in the news at the time, there were lots of images of migrants who were trying to cross the water to get to Italy, for example, or to Greece. And so these silver blankets, so this idea of emergency. And so they're, sort of learning to become politicized, I guess, in this project. So you can see their manifesto that they wrote together, all the kids, all the bathrooms are gender neutral and family bathrooms. Love is love is love is love, all people are equal, all spaces are safe spaces, and so on. And then I love money is not the only currency that ends equal pay for all. This is in Quebec, the Wapakoni Mobile Team is this these filmmakers that would get into a truck and had all this, or van, and basically would have all of this recording material, and would go into the north of Quebec where different indigenous communities live. This project is called Throat Singing in Canadian Soup. So these two young women, Manon Chamberlain and Eva Kaukai, learned how to use cameras, how to use the video, and in this video they show themselves throat singing. And throat singing was something that was banned as an activity when first was banned as an activity as being not Christian. And so it's only recently been revived by elders in the 90s who are teaching it to a younger generation. And basically it's a kind of game where they're like singing towards each other and to see who will laugh first. So you see them laughing, singing, and then getting serious because of the way the breath works, then it gets more and more serious and more intense.
The breath?
Sorry?
The breath?
Yeah, I can't do it, but they're just like, just from the,
Intake?
yeah, just going in and out, and then gazing into each other's eyes, it's very intense. And then on the right, I wanted to show too, I commissioned from this Cuban graphic designer and illustrator, Yaina Lopez Zaldivar, who lives now in Vancouver. I commissioned him to make these prints, these sort of movie posters for each of the projects. I thought, usually if you make video in contemporary art, you don't have a movie poster. And so he made these different posters for each of the videos. And I also like that he was, coming from a tradition. He'd been schooled in Cuba and very inspired by the Cuban history of screen printing for politics, and also for cultural reasons. So, with this project, again, a very video-focused exhibition called Codes of Silence. So I feel like there's like this, do you hear it? Or like a reverb, but maybe a little bit. So Codes of Silence, I wanted to do something that was, a lot of the documentary works thinking about representation, are often centered on the voice, and I thought it would be interesting to think about how you represent yourself without using your voice. And I was inspired by the scholar Kevin Kwashi, who's an African-American writer, who wrote about quiet could be a powerful mode of communication. So he argues that in the face of violence, suppression, and erasure, African-American communities have had to prioritize public-facing, politicized types of communication, often to the detriment of more inward-facing modes of expression. So while acknowledging the necessity for the discourse of resistance to be bold and in your face for maximum legibility within the public arena, Kevin Kwashi also underscores the radical potential of cultivating expressions of quiet. So he employs quiet as a metaphor for the full range of one's inner life. Also, he argues quiet can offer a kind of protective safeguard against, quote, the dominance of the social world. It has its own sovereignty. Which is a very interesting consideration of what quiet can mean. Because usually when you think quiet, you're thinking, if somebody is silent, you're thinking they've been muted or they're being censored, but this is a different type of quiet. Oh my gosh, I have to stop doing that. This is a very it's way more sensitive than mine. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry about that. Okay. Sorry. So this project here, we have one video on the right. Is by Colleen Smith, so African-American artist. And she's made this video that references the Dutch conceptual performance artist Bas Jan Ader's videos Primary Time and Untitled Flower works. So in these works, Ader is dressed in black. He makes and remakes bouquets of flowers in yellow, red, and blue. So basically referencing So Colleen Smith does that. She kind of remakes the video, and she does this flower arranging, but instead she kind of goes beyond just this kind of aesthetic exercise, where she's thinking, she was thinking about grief. So here she's mourning the tragic death of a friend's nephew, and thinking about other Black youth like him who have faced this tragic end. So she made these bouquets in black, blue, and white, which she mentions are the colors of bruising. And instead of the silence, she has just music. She doesn't speak, but she has music by this live music by this musician Anthony Braxton, suggesting that only music and not words can communicate the depths of her pain and the complexity of her grief. This is a really talented filmmaker, Shirley Bruno, who is a divided time between Haiti and Brooklyn. In this film, the short film, she reworks a popular Haitian folktale called Tizen. And so basically she works with a real 3-generational family. So she films a 3-generational family living together under one roof in rural Haiti. So we get to see, while she's kind of recreating this folktale, we're also seeing, in a documentary style, the daily rhythms of their domestic life, when they're collecting water, preparing food, eating and talking together as family. So I wanted something that was not necessarily, it wasn't like silent, but it really, it shows this young woman who's the main character. It shows her in reflection, thinking, and it really makes you kind of realize how rarely you see in cinema Black people just thinking or just being quiet or not being funny or supportive, or they're just, so it's a very different type of representation and presence, which I find very interesting. And then finally, I have this work by Kathleen Monet, Creatura Dada, where she has this, I don't know if you would recognize any of these Indigenous artists. They're all from Montreal, but the one in the middle is a very famous, internationally famous documentary filmmaker called Alani Sobom-Selin. So she's the older woman in the middle. So she's been working since the 60s and still working today. So she's like, so she's 90. She works with the Canadian NFB board, and she's had many important and influential documentary films as Kansas 270 Years of Resistance. So in this video, the short video, Kathleen Monet, who's the artist on the left, basically has all of these artists come together where you see them discussing and talking during a dinner, but we never get to hear what they're saying. And she says when she made it, I wanted to think of them, imagine them having a revolution, these Indigenous women, but I didn't want to share the knowledge with everybody. It was just for us. And then I included paintings from the gallery's collection. As I mentioned, there's lots of people in, some of our publics are not necessarily, maybe aren't necessarily video lovers. And so I added paintings in between them, which kind of often almost gave a kind of break or created an atmosphere between the videos. So I kind of wanted to use the paintings as almost kind of like links between the videos, and so can see some of them. There's one here, which is much more obvious, where this is a big bouquet of flowers. These are sort of strategies that I use, given that we're in this community, in a gallery that's also in a community center, where a lot of people who are also coming through are people who are just dropped by from the library, for example. Okay, I'll just blast through really quickly because I know. But this one is food waste. So this is an exhibition that I was working on for quite a long time. So I was inspired. I mean, obviously, food has been a huge inspiration for so many artists. I was really inspired by the art historian Zoë, who argues in her essay, The Nourishing Arts. She writes, the domestic processing of food is a domain where tradition and innovation matter equally, demanding as much intelligence, imagination, and memory as those traditionally held as superior, such as music or weaving. So I love that idea that food in itself, just cooking, is just like any art, like music, weaving. And you can think of, for example, the choreography of cooking together with other people. But also I just wanted to use food as a way, as a sort of lens that artists, or a vessel that artists are using to work through various issues, questions around community, transmission of knowledge, cultural identity. How does geography and colonial histories percolate through food practices? So I put my mom in on the right. I just decided to put my family in when I could. With my mom, this is kind of one of the first times she's seen one of my exhibitions. So this is an artist, Paul Wong. Paul Wong made this project called Mother's Cupboard, where he pulled from his mom's cupboard all these different things that she has collected over time. So these in these recycled jars. So these are like coffee jars, Miracle Whip mayonnaise, and she has dried mushrooms, elixirs that she made. So he was very impressed. He was impressed by her knowledge of Chinese medicine, but also kind of just wanted to pay homage to his mother herself. So it's he took everything out of this dark crowded cupboard and kind of shot them almost more like using kind of advertising against these like bright white backgrounds, very large scale. This is another work. This is a work by Marley Newman, who did the title wall that you saw in the beginning, called Piece Together. So she did research on Richmond's first grocery store that served Richmond has a lot of fishermen when it first became a town. And so she she went into the archives and found all these photographs of this shop, this grocery shop, and decided to make these prints thinking about all of the items in that grocery store and what that served that community, and thinking about how what is on the shelves actually reflects that community. So they had rubber boots because they were fishermen. There's lamps. You can't really see very well, but they have like rat poison. But she said, like, when you look at the photos, these black and white photos. It'll have rice next to, chocolate bars next to sunglasses, next to rat poison. So everything's just like pell-mell together. But I just thought it was a really beautiful way of making an archival photo, which most people are, oh, it's boring, it's research, it's archives, but making it come alive in this really bright and vivid way. This is Sarah Angelucci's work. I wanted, when people walked in, to right away have this lush feeling of growth. These are plants that she documented at night in her own garden and during the pandemic, and then later in Italy, where her grandmother grew up. In the front, Patrick Cruz made these low installations with tablecloths, which have printed on them recipes that he would cook for them, and then they would give them their favorite recipe. So all across the tablecloths are these recipes. And this table became used during the exhibition this was a tea ceremony with an artist, Man Wong, a Chinese artist whose family has a tea plantation, and his father is a tea master. And so by the end, the tablecloths also gather the stains from the tea and different activities. This is an artist by a Nigerian-Canadian artist called Kosi Nebe. It's a bit hard to see, not a good photograph, sorry about that, but where she kind of uses this kind of almost scientific or medical way of shooting herself, working with cassava, which when it's processed in a certain way can be used as poison, can be poisonous. So she basically gives the directions, cut and peel, so these are all sort of directions how to create this poison. She was interested in a history that she had researched, which showed slaves in different colonies could, do things by creating this poison from the cassava root. Could, sometimes poison their master, or kill animals against the master, or even have abortions. So I wanted to include something where food was not celebratory too. This is an indigenous artist from a Shuapnik artist, Tanya Willard. So she is an artist and a teacher, a garlic farmer. And she's very committed to creating, to applying and working with Shuapnik indigenous craft and technique and values. So you see here in the middle with fringe labor, she's created this kind of tent-like structure that you might see at a market, or it's very rough. There's like the sandbags in the bottom, but then it's she has this great mix of materials where she's got this hand-cut deer hide fringe. So this very beautiful decorative fringe, and then up above is just a basic tent. And so she's very interested in food sovereignty for Indigenous peoples in Canada. These are a series of banners that she created, which are kind of like poems. We also, in the next slide, you'll see she created a series of decolonial, what she calls decolonial tea services. So something that does not look like, British delicate porcelain. So she has these very hardy ceramic vessels. This is a project that she did called Future Feasts, with laser cut print on used butcher paper. So her father is a hunter. So all these are just used butcher paper, and if you come close, you can see it has signs like, this is deer meat, or, tells you the cut of meat. You can see there's a print of a basket, and the basket and that the weaving pattern the basket is a very important recurring motif in her artwork. The basket, she said, is how you carry knowledge, how she brings all the knowledge, food, so both sort of metaphorically and literally what she brings with her. And this is her decolonial tea service, and you can see that these very large ceramic pots, and with each where she activated the ceramics, but also you can see on the left she's made these like beautiful, huge tea bags with different mixes of tea soaking. And then finally, I showed my curatorial research in these vitrines, also wanting to, with an exhibition like Food Waste that I've been working on for years, obviously I couldn't include everything, so I wanted to also show all the magazines and artist books and things that I've looked at when researching this. So I think I'll probably end there, but I think you can see that documentary and materiality are something that definitely run through my work. Also desire to foreground questions revolving around diasporic identity. I imagine people will be given my own immigrant background, but also thinking about food, about youth, indigeneity. But I think I'll end there. I don't know if anyone has any questions or wants to look at any other photos or.
Thinking in through your career, there's like a clear path on including in your work like a lot of minorities, and not just ethnical, but I think also like your work with youth. It's also like sometimes a voice that is silenced. So I wanted to ask you how your voice as a curator has been shaped through this path. Has it come like from your own state as a migrant, or do you think it's like the things that you have encountered, or like what took you there?
I mean, it's hard to say. There's so many different, for sure, just having had an experience of being immigrant, I've always, I'm alert to that. I'm sensitive to that, I think. And also in Canada, it's, you're surrounded, like I said, I was surrounded by it so much today, but also when, I'm not the only one, obviously. But I think too, at that first job that I had, it was a very influential time for me. I was in my early 20s, and the gallery that I was working at, it was not just a regular gallery. We also helped artists. There were lots of new immigrants who would come, so we helped them write grants for their first grant, for example. So there was also, it was a very influential time where I was very lucky. I came as a child, and I came when I already spoke English, but there were people who were, fully grown adults, and so I think witnessing their struggles, and that it is really difficult. So I feel coming to Richmond is kind of like a circle for me of coming back to that kind of work. Because before I worked at Richmond, I was working at Vancouver Art Gallery, and it's very big, and so it's hard to maybe give that kind of attention to the artists in a very individual way. It's like anybody, it's when you're in it doesn't feel like a clear path. And you bring everything with you. You bring your influences, whether it's your family, your friends, your travel, what you're reading, the films you see,
approachment or interest in this kind of exhibitions? Like you really assist to these places, or it's separate from the artist community?
Right. Like, are they interested in questions of immigration, or is that what you mean?
I mean, do they assist for the public program? Do they engage with exhibitions?
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes it's linked to the subject matter sometimes. So sometimes we'll connect to one community more than another. I think with all the exhibitions I'm doing there, I'm trying to find something that will connect a lot of different people. Food obviously was one of our more popular exhibitions. Sorry, but for example, leading up to the exhibition, we tried to, so before the exhibition opened, so all summer we had these different types of workshops to kind of create interest too, on things more like printmaking, so sort of things that were maybe less difficult, but then so we kind of built a following, and then maybe that kind of prepares them for the actual exhibition. Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. If that's what you meant, or. But yeah, sometimes we have, sometimes it's just like people who are just coming through because they just saw it, they didn't come specifically for it. So sometimes it's, the gallery attendants are having these kind of questions, like, why are you doing this? Or what does this mean? Or
And also, I was wondering, maybe you can talk a little bit of why you're doing research right here in Mexico City, or what are your projects right now?
I mean, this is such like my first visit to Mexico City, so I feel like it's just very overstimulated. Obviously, food is huge, but everything from the architecture, it kind of gives you ideas, like just this open close. It's so cool. Like, yeah, I want that. So there's that. I don't have something specific as yet. I just kind of wanted to have the opportunity to visit all the these different museums, and just to be in this very different atmosphere. It's very different from Vancouver. It's very like there's lots of very inspiring things you just see just walking on the streets, just because everything in Vancouver has to have permission for every single thing. So it's interesting. But I don't think I will be able in such a short time, be able to. But it's incredible how many museums are here.
And one more thing, sorry. Looking at your last slide, which was sort of like your process. I was wondering, which techniques do you think are important to showcase all the work that is going on behind the scenes for every exhibition? Because I've never seen anything like this, and I think it's such an important thing to show, because there's so much investigation and research and everything behind it. So which techniques do you use to show
my research?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I'm the only person who's done this, just to be clear, but other ways, that's a good question. Well, when I did the Kids These Days exhibition, one thing that I did, because of the artists were using, a lot of the artists were using documentary, they were using documentary strategies, so I decided to do a documentary strategy towards them. And I asked them to fill out this questionnaire about, what were their ideas about youth, what did they associate with youth, why were they drawn to this as their, and then I showed their answers beside each each one. So that was my sort of research on them, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes I'll show behind the scenes imagery, I suppose, of how I'll ask the artist to share with me, or share with the public their behind the scenes, like how it looks to make a work or something like that. But yeah, there's so much stuff that goes into curatorial research. Some of it is like, serious, you're in a book, looking at books, or you're Googling, but other times it's, you're just kind of thinking, I don't know, or you're just kind of walking along, or you hear a song, or, it's a great question. And I don't know if people are always interested. It's nice that you're interested, but maybe it's because you study art history. For me too, but for me it's fun, but I don't know for everybody it's fun. Yeah, but it's a good question, because if I like process, then what is my process? Yeah.
And with the questionnaires that you make, do you also make a strategy to present your exhibition? What I mean by that is that you said that you have paintings, and to make it more, engageable.
Yeah.
So I was wondering which are other strategies that you use.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm learning all the time. This is the first time that I'm curating really regularly, because I have a lot of freedom at this gallery. At Vancouver Art Gallery, it was, maybe it's okay, maybe in 2 years. I have been, I guess I'm trying to find strategies to make people who maybe aren't interested in art, or find it maybe difficult to draw them in. So, I don't know, let's see. This is something that I started doing, where I asked artists to, I didn't just to show this image, but I asked artists to create the title walls. So this one here, the artist, it was an exhibition about artists who were working with plastic. And so I asked this artist to create something, and so she created this, where she used corrugated plastic that she found in the back, cable ties for computers, Sharpie marker, and so people are drawn to something because they're she just found that in the recycling, so that's something I've been experimenting with. This also gives opportunity for the artist to create something and not just have vinyl all the time. Or I also had it too for so this artist, Marlene Ewan, who made all the prints. She made this print, and that became the title wall, and it's very engaging, and so I mean, it's always different things. Like I told you, I commissioned the artist to do to make posters for all of the videos, or sometimes it's the seating, and then we have different things, like we do QR codes where you can hear, sometimes it's just the work the label is read to you can listen to it. Or sometimes the QR code will link to the artist talking about the work themselves, so it's not just one person talking about the work. And I guess the public programs that we do, I don't really organize the public programs, my colleague does, but so those are things that we are experimenting with, but each exhibition is different, so trying to do something different with each of them.
And also I can see a lot of strategies around museography, right?
Right, I try. I mean, I think at my time when I was at the Vancouver Art Gallery, they had, much bigger budget. But I think I learned a lot of things too that they would do, to kind of create, more of the layout, I guess. The museological layout. So like the posters, for example, like creating a big wall.
In high school, nice.
Yeah, exactly. Different types. Just so that people are aware all the time that there's different things. Yeah, it makes them more alert, I hope. And with video, for example, I think video can be kind of hard, and so I tried to think of it like a screening. So it's like, okay, if you came in, you're here for an hour, and so the video doesn't go over an hour. I don't know. It's not that I'm against long videos, but I think it's hard for people to be in a space and it's not ideal conditions and it's a hard chair. So, But maybe I'll use popcorn next time. Okay. Thank you so much for such a nice talk.
Thank you, Zoe, for your presentation and for the questions. Y pues, este es el último miércoles estructurado de SOMA en esta sede. Gracias por acompañarnos.
What an honor.
Yes.